Picture this: a dim room lit only by a faint shaft of light slipping through a half-closed window. You sit there in silence, eyes fixed on nothing, heart heavier than the night around you. You replay the moments when you gave everything, your trust, your loyalty, your love, and in return, you were betrayed. The promises you believed in now echo like cruel jokes. The warmth you offered returned with cold abandonment. In that silence, one question haunts you: how could I have been so good to the wrong people? This is where Stoicism steps in, not as a cold philosophy, but as a living fire. It teaches you to let go, to reclaim yourself, and to watch time burn away the falsehoods of those who wronged you. You don't rise above betrayal by chasing revenge. You rise by mastering indifference, resilience, and quiet strength. The most powerful response is not to destroy your enemies, but to live so fully, so unshakably calm, that their regret becomes their own silent prison. And here's the truth: if you've ever been betrayed, you are not alone. Let that sink in. Let your silence and your life speak louder than any vindication ever could. Part 1: Tesla, the betrayed genius. You imagine a man standing alone in a crowded city, a mind overflowing with visions of the future, yet a heart crushed under the weight of betrayal. Nikola Tesla, the genius whose inventions light the world, died penniless in a small New York hotel room, feeding pigeons as his only companions. The irony is haunting. The very man who dreamed of wireless power, of illuminating the planet, was himself left in darkness. His ideas, his brilliance, his trust, all taken advantage of by men who saw profit where he saw possibility. He trusted too deeply, gave too freely, and watched others steal both his recognition and his fortune. Think about that. The fluorescent lights above you, the electricity humming through your walls. Much of it traces back to him. Yet Tesla never reaped the glory while he lived. He gave his brilliance to the wrong people, and they exploited him without mercy. His story reads like a Greek tragedy. The visionary betrayed, the world benefiting, while he faded into obscurity. Picture him in his final years, a thin figure in a darkened room, sketching impossible machines no one would fund, while those who once dismissed him grew rich off his genius. And here's where the Stoics step in. Epictetus, himself once a slave, taught that you cannot control other people, only your own response to them. Betrayal, theft, cruelty, these lie outside your power. What lies within is your choice, whether to drown in bitterness or to rise with dignity. Tesla, for all his suffering, never wasted his life chasing revenge. He didn't hunt down Edison, who publicly mocked him. He didn't fight the bankers who squeezed him dry. Instead, he kept creating. He kept imagining. He kept letting time reveal the truth. And indeed, time has. Today, we speak Tesla's name with reverence. Edison is remembered, yes, but often with a footnote of exploitation. J.P. Morgan had wealth, but his legacy is not inspiration. Tesla, the betrayed, the forgotten in life, is now celebrated as the symbol of genius and innovation. His revenge was not loud. It was history itself. And now, I turn to you. How many times have you given everything, your effort, your love, your ideas, only to be left staring into emptiness when someone walked away? How many nights have you wondered if your generosity was foolish, if your trust was a mistake? You gave your loyalty, and they left you with silence. You poured your heart, and they returned it shattered. Betrayal doesn't just wound your trust in others. It makes you question yourself. Was it my fault? Am I too naive? Did I deserve this? Modern psychology tells us that betrayal trauma cuts deeper than almost any wound. When you are betrayed, especially by someone you trusted, the brain registers it as a kind of existential threat. Your nervous system spirals, replaying the loss, trying to make sense of what feels senseless. And here, the Stoics offer a lifeline. You cannot control that someone lied to you, used you, or abandoned you. You cannot rewrite what they chose to do, but you can control whether you will relive their betrayal 1,000 times in your own mind. Tesla teaches you that the wrong people can take your work, your resources, even your recognition, but they cannot take your spirit unless you hand it over. Epictetus would remind you, the thief may steal your gold, but only you can give away your peace of mind. You may feel empty now, but that emptiness is not your essence. It is only the shadow left by their absence, and shadows pass. Your task, then, is not to seek revenge or obsess over fairness. It is to stay rooted in your own integrity. Like Tesla, you may not see the vindication today. You may feel like your goodness has only brought you pain, but give it time. History has a way of exposing lies and elevating truth. What matters is that you hold fast to your own values, because that is the one realm no one can invade. So tonight, when you sit in silence, ask yourself, am I willing to let those who betrayed me keep living rent-free in my mind? Or am I ready to let time and truth be my witnesses while I keep moving forward? The first choice keeps you chained to them. The second frees you. And freedom, inner freedom, is the only victory worth having. Remember Tesla in that lonely room. Yes, but also remember how his name outlived his betrayers. Let that be your reminder. When you remain faithful to your path, the wrong people eventually burn in the quiet fire of their own regret. And as we move forward, you'll see that betrayal, no matter how deep, can become the very soil where resilience grows. Some leave behind sparks, like Tesla. Others transform their pain into a legacy, like Frida Kahlo, a canvas that still bleeds with truth. Part 2. Frida Kahlo and Alan Turing, turning pain into legacy. Some wounds never fully heal, but instead of burying you in darkness, they can become the very fire that lights up the world. Look at the life of Frida Kahlo. You don't just see a painter, you see a soul torn apart, who laid her broken pieces onto canvas. After the brutal bus accident that shattered her body, Frida lived in constant pain. To make matters worse, the man she loved, Diego Rivera, betrayed her trust more than once. And yet instead of collapsing, Frida chose to turn her wounds into art. Her paintings weren't merely beautiful. They were bleeding wounds that spoke. They told the truth of her suffering so powerfully that anyone who looked at them felt their own pain begin to release. She showed the world that pain, when faced directly, can become an immortal legacy. Pause for a moment. How many times have you given your heart, your trust, your very soul, only to be betrayed, abandoned, or left shattered? Most people in that moment either lash out with vengeance or destroy themselves. Frida demonstrated another way. She took that pain and transmuted it into something higher. This is precisely what Seneca meant when he wrote, "The greatest revenge is not to be like your enemy." When Diego betrayed her, She didn't become a betrayer. When her body betrayed her, she didn't let it crush her spirit. Instead, she turned her truth into beauty, creating work so raw, so honest, that the world would never again look away. If Frida was the cry turned into color, Alan Turing was the quiet genius whose tragedy became the foundation of our modern world. Turing, the brilliant mathematician who cracked the Enigma code and helped end World War II, gave humanity the gift of computer science. Yet, his own nation repaid him with betrayal. Rather than honoring his genius, the British government condemned him, not for his work, but for his sexuality. He was prosecuted, chemically castrated, and humiliated. His life ended in solitude under the crushing weight of injustice. And still, even in the midst of torment, Turing kept working. He kept building. He kept contributing to humanity. That is the Stoic lesson at its core. You cannot control how the world treats you, but you can control how you live in the face of it. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And Turing embodied this. Though betrayed, he refused to stop creating. Though silenced, he left behind the foundation of the modern digital age. Time, the ultimate judge, restored what the world once tried to erase. Today, his name is honored worldwide as the father of computer science. Here's the truth you must wrestle with. What will you do with your own wounds? Will you let them bury you, or will you turn them into fire? Pain is inevitable. Betrayal is inevitable. Injustice is inevitable. But you can choose how you respond. Frida chose truth through art. Turing chose brilliance through persistence. Both prove that the path of resilience is stronger than the path of revenge. This is the very heart of Stoicism, not running from pain, but transforming it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Pain is not a barrier, it is the path, and when you walk it, something shifts. One day, those who betrayed you will be left with only regret, while you stand free, built by the very suffering that was meant to break you. So the next time you revisit your own wounds, don't ask, "Why me?" Ask instead, "What can I build from this?" Write it down. Let the act of reflecting on your pain help you find the seed of creation within it. If Frida hadn't endured heartbreak, would her art have reached the world's soul? If Turing hadn't faced injustice, would his legacy speak so loudly about integrity in the face of betrayal? Their tragedies did not erase them. They carved their names into history. Their stories remind you that freedom begins the moment you stop seeking revenge and stop begging for recognition. Freedom begins when you turn pain into a legacy no one can take away. And when personal pain can be transformed into legacy, the next level of power often comes from silence. Letting your life speak while the world around you scrambles for attention. That is where we move next. How silence becomes the ultimate instrument of regret. Part 3, Beyoncé and Marlene Dietrich, when silence becomes their regret. There is a silence that cuts deeper than any scream, a silence so powerful it forces the guilty to confront themselves. You know this kind of silence. It's the silence after betrayal, when words would be wasted, when explanations would only feed the fire. And it is in that silence that the betrayer begins to suffocate under the weight of their own regret. Take Beyoncé. At the height of her career, When the world's eyes were fixed on her, she discovered betrayal within her most intimate circle. Her marriage. She could have lashed out. She could have waged a public war, airing every wound for the world to see. But instead, she chose a different path. She turned her pain into art. Lemonade was not just an album, it was a revelation. Through her music, she spoke to millions of women who had carried the same wounds, the same sense of betrayal. She never screamed at the man who hurt her. She didn't need to. Her silence in public became louder than any accusation because it was filled with truth. And imagine the weight of that silence for the one who betrayed her. To live every day knowing the whole world had witnessed the wound you inflicted, not through a fight, but through the unflinching honesty of art. That is a prison no walls can contain. It is the quiet kind of justice. You keep rising while they are left to shrink in the shadow of their own choices. This is where Stoicism meets modern resilience. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Beyoncé lived that truth. She didn't meet betrayal with destruction. She transmuted it into creation. And in that act, she freed herself while leaving the betrayer locked inside the cage of his own conscience. But silence doesn't only belong to the personal. Sometimes it's a political act, a defiance so strong it shakes nations. Look at Marlene Dietrich, the German actress and singer whose life was marked by courage. When Hitler rose to power, he invited her to return to Germany, promising wealth and fame. Many others complied. Many stayed silent in the face of tyranny. But Dietrich said no. She left her homeland, refused to lend her voice to the propaganda machine, and instead performed for Allied troops during World War II. At first, many called her a traitor, a betrayer of her own people. The pain of being rejected by her homeland must have been immense. And yet, time revealed the truth. Decades later, Germany recognized her courage. The same nation that once turned its back on her now honors her as one of its most iconic figures. Those who had called her a traitor were forgotten. Her silence in the face of evil became her eternal vindication. Do you see the pattern? The betrayer is always loud in the moment. They boast, they justify, they walk away as if they have won. But silence is patient. It waits, it lingers. And then, when the years have passed, when the dust has settled, silence turns into the loudest truth. The world eventually sees who was faithful and who was false. The betrayer is left with only their regret. Think about your own life. How many times have you wanted to shout back, to prove them wrong, to show everyone the truth immediately? That impulse is natural, but it also traps you, because when you fight on their level, you become entangled in their ugliness. Stoicism reminds you, you don't need to match their betrayal with noise. You can let silence speak for you. And here's the paradox. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means strength so unshakable that you don't need to defend yourself. It means trusting that time, truth, and your own persistence will reveal everything. As Seneca said, time heals what reason cannot. In time, those who wronged you will face themselves, and when they do, your silence will echo in their conscience louder than any words you could have spoken. So the next time someone betrays you, resist the urge to fight with noise. Instead, stand firm, stay silent, and keep moving forward. One day, their regret will be the loudest sound in the room, And sometimes silence is not just about endurance. It's about returning stronger than ever. Because there is a way to answer betrayal, not with words, not even with silence, but with a comeback so powerful, it silences everyone. Part 4. Howard Schultz. The power of a comeback. Sometimes, the best response to betrayal is not silence alone, but a comeback so powerful it rewrites the story entirely. When someone casts you aside, when they think they've closed the door on you, your greatest victory may be to walk back through that very door with a strength they never imagined you could gather. Consider Howard Schultz, the man behind Starbucks. He wasn't born into wealth or privilege. He grew up in the Brooklyn projects, watching his father struggle with low-paying jobs and broken dreams. To Schultz, coffee was never just a drink. It was an opportunity, a way to create community, a way to treat workers with dignity, something his father had rarely experienced. Schultz poured his heart into Starbucks, building it from a small chain into a vision of connection and care. But then, the very people he helped enrich, the board of his own company, pushed him out. Imagine it, creating something from nothing, nurturing it like a child, only to have it taken by those you trusted most. That is betrayal at its sharpest. He could have cursed them. He could have spent years railing against injustice. But Schultz chose differently. He let his values, not his anger, guide him. He didn't waste energy on revenge. He poured it into resilience. And when the opportunity came, he returned, not bitter, but sharper, clearer, and more determined than ever. Under his leadership, Starbucks didn't just succeed. It became a global empire, with cafes in cities across the world, a symbol of connection and community. The very people who once pushed him aside had to watch his vision grow beyond what they could imagine. His comeback wasn't fueled by bitterness. It was fueled by belief. This is where Stoicism speaks to you directly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. Betrayal, no matter how cruel, has no lasting power unless you allow it to dwell inside you." The board could remove Schultz from Starbucks, but they could not remove his vision. They could not take away his will. His greatest triumph was not just reclaiming his company, but proving that no betrayal could touch the core of who he was. Now, think about your own life. Perhaps someone dismissed you, told you weren't good enough, or shut the door in your face. The natural temptation is to brood, to make it your mission to prove them wrong directly. But here's the Stoic truth. You don't owe them revenge. You owe yourself growth. Your energy belongs to your comeback, not their downfall. Here is a practical exercise you can try today. The next time you feel betrayed, write down what they took from you, or what they thought they took. Right beside it, write what they cannot touch. Your vision, your values, your determination. Every time you see that list, remind yourself that your true power lives in what is untouchable. Then, build from that place. Your comeback doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real. And remember, not every victory comes through dramatic returns. Sometimes, the greatest strength is shown not by roaring back, but by walking away with quiet dignity, carrying yourself so steadily that the world cannot help but respect you. Not every victory needs to be loud. Sometimes true strength is quiet. Part 5. Angela Merkel, The Strength of Silence. Not all power is loud. Some of the strongest leaders never needed to shout, retaliate, or humiliate those who underestimated them. Sometimes quiet composure speaks louder than words, and dignity leaves a deeper mark than vengeance ever could. Few leaders embody this more than Angela Merkel. For 16 years, Merkel stood at the helm of Germany, and by extension, much of Europe. She was not flashy. She rarely delivered fiery speeches or raised her voice. Instead, she led with patience, steady judgment, and quiet determination. Time and again, she was underestimated by rivals, critics, and even allies who mistook her calm demeanor for weakness. And yet, when she finally stepped down, even her fiercest opponents recognized the truth. She left a legacy defined not by noise, but by unwavering presence. Think about your own life. How often do you see someone win an argument by shouting the loudest? Noise grabs attention, but rarely earns respect. Merkel understood what Stoics have always taught. True strength doesn't need to announce itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "The best answer to anger is silence." Responding with bitterness or reaction only surrenders your composure. Remaining steady, allowing time and truth to reveal your character. That is how you leave a mark that cannot be erased. Consider someone in your life who tried to provoke you. Maybe a colleague, a friend, or even a family member. If you had snapped back, they would have won twice. Once in wronging you, and again in dragging you down. But when you remain calm, grounded in your own integrity, you deny them that victory. Over time, the weight shifts to them, not because of your words, but because of everything you chose not to say. Psychology calls this the silence effect. Studies show that when someone expects a reaction and gets none, it unsettles them. They are left with their own conscience, their own guilt, and awareness of what they've done. That is the power Merkel wielded, not by shouting, but by staying steadfast. Angela Merkel showed the world this principle in action. When others lashed out, she remained steady. When attention seekers clamored, she focused on the work itself. And when she stepped down, she did not deliver a bitter speech or boast of her accomplishments. She simply walked away, leaving the world to measure the weight of her absence. Her quiet exit said, "My worth does not depend on proving anything to you." Here's a practical takeaway you can use today. The next time someone provokes or betrays you, pause. Before firing off a text, comment, or angry word, try holding your response. Let them sit with their own actions. Redirect your energy toward building your life, your work, and your peace. Even small everyday acts, smiling through frustration, focusing on your priorities, maintaining professionalism, amplify this principle. In time, your calm will speak louder than any argument. Their regret will come, not from your words, but from your unwavering presence. Seneca reminded us, "The greatest revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Silence is not weakness. It is refusing to become like those who hurt you. And this brings us to the ultimate truth. The final victory over betrayal is not revenge, not even recognition. It is inner peace. When you find peace within yourself, no betrayal can touch you, and no regret of theirs can disturb your calm. They will regret. But you don't have to stay and watch, because your life has already moved into a light so bright, there's no room left for their shadows. The truth is, regret is their burden to carry, not yours. And your refusal to return to the battlefield of bitterness, your quiet, deliberate composure, is the ultimate victory. Think back on every figure we've explored on this journey. Tesla, Frida Kahlo, Alan Turing, Beyoncé, Marlene Dietrich, Howard Schultz, Angela Merkel. Each of them faced betrayal, doubt, or injustice. None wasted their energy shouting back or seeking revenge. Instead, they turned pain into creation, resilience, and influence, building legacies so undeniable that those who once wronged them had no choice but to live with their regret. That is the Stoic secret. You don't punish your enemies with vengeance. You punish them by thriving without them. Your story is no different. Perhaps someone left you, betrayed you, or underestimated you. And maybe, for a while, it felt like the wound would never heal. But every step forward, every quiet act of strength, every choice to stay focused on your growth is a reminder. Your pain becomes your power. Pause here. Feel that weight. The most devastating answer to those who wronged you is not anger, not shouting, not revenge. It is the life you live despite them. It is the calm, deliberate energy you pour into building yourself, into shaping your legacy, into claiming your freedom. Your pain becomes your power. Now I challenge you. If you're ready to stop feeding your enemies with your attention, if you're ready to let your silence and your success speak louder than any retaliation, prove it with a like on this video. And in the comments, share one short story about a time when you were betrayed or underestimated. Tell it not to reopen the wound, but to claim the power in your pain. I will select one of those stories to feature in our next video, because your strength deserves to be heard